Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of the Pirate Rugby Pod. We had an incredible week with the last podcast, and we're thrilled to have blasted past our YouTube subscriber goal of 250. Our next stop is 500. So again, thanks to everybody who's followed us so far. If you like what we do, please like, comment and share a link to the pod with your friends. It really helps the algorithm find us.
A reminder that we have an audio-only bonus pod that you can find on Spotify or Apple, the Friday Breakfast Show. At 15 minutes, it's a great way to start your Friday morning commute and tee up your weekend of rugby. We cover the midweek news, results, and give you your TV guide for the weekend ahead so you can catch all the rugby that you love. So, with the promos out of the way, mate, what was your rugby moment of the week?
It had to have been Angus Bell. Have you seen this clip of him?
Yeah, I saw
Angus
it live.
Bell. Yeah, in playing for the Barbarians, made one of his textbook breaks, a couple of side steps in there, and yeah, put a little beautiful grubber through. I don't know how he had the time, the space, and the foresight to do it, all of it, but it was absolutely brilliant and set up a score. And I just thought it was definitely my moment of the week. I love seeing a prop in action like that, do something a bit out of the ordinary, and something he definitely wouldn't have got away with playing for Australia under Eddie Jones.
No,
just to caveat that.
I think Andrew Ford has got a compilation of props doing like line breaks and things. It's so beautiful, and they always look so excited. But what was with the referee spending like 5 minutes doing a TMO check for the offside for the try? It's like, it's a Barbars game, mate. Just come on, just give the try. Like no one's that upset. If Wales had lost that game, which I thought they had a good chance of, because that Barbarians pack was ridiculous. If like just let it go. Who cares? Just go for it, man. So yeah, I completely love that one.
Yeah, that had to have been mine. What about yourself?
So I was enjoying myself down at Parker Scarlets at the weekend. I got to go down. It's about 3-hour drive for me, but it was well worth it. Down to the park to see the derby between Scarlets and Cardiff. And I was documenting it on Twitter and putting up little updates and things as I was going. And there's the full vlog now over on the Wrap YouTube channel, which there'll be a link in the description below. And yeah, when I got there, there was a lady handing out flags and things, and her colleague as well. And they painted the red dragon on my face. And Big M, who I was with, who I did the Scarlets pod with, said, "Can you give this guy a flag?" And the lady who was handing out the flags said, "I know who you are." So that's my first time ever being recognised as a I don't know, a Twitter person,
a
rugby person. And she was like, "You're the guy who's doing the thread." And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "Welcome." And she made me feel really welcome. She gave me a flag and she just took a photo of me and things and posted it on the Scarlet supporters page and things. So that was lovely. So thank you, Helen. And thank you to all your team. You clearly work extremely hard making fans' experiences at the game really good. And the for all of the doom and gloom at Parker Scarlets, it's a really nice facility that they've got there. It's not massive. It looks bigger on TV than it feels in real life. But it's in good nick. It's all very neat and tidy. It's not run down in any way. That sounds like I'm damning it with faint praise. No, it's really nice, and it's had loads of you can tell they spend money on it regularly, which is nice. So yeah, so that was my moment of the week, just being a little bit of imposter syndrome, just kind of like, oh, come on, guys, it's just, I'm only here to see a game. Don't fuss, But it was nice. So.
But I think just touching on the stadium, I think it is an important point. Like, I know when the Scarlets were doing well a couple of seasons ago, they would get big crowds in there, and it's just nice to see rugby played in a purpose-built stadium for rugby. Like, I think it can be frustrating sometimes watching teams play, like especially the Lions. Well, we all know that they used to get huge crowds, but for whatever reason, probably because their performances on the field, they don't get big crowds anymore. And it's really, there's no atmosphere when they're playing at such a big stadium like that. So it's good to see that the Scarlets have that. Now, I know like it wasn't anywhere near a sellout, right? But there was still a good crowd there, right? And when they're doing well, you can really build that atmosphere in such close quarters, right?
There was, yeah, it's absolutely right. So the official attendance was like 6,300, which is not huge, but you have to remember a lot of context around it about how there was a Wales game happening in Cardiff effectively at the same time, which was a big distraction. And I was surprised at the gate that Wales got for the Barbars game. I thought it was going to be quite poor, but it was still 50,000 turned up for it, which
Yeah.
is very nearly the capacity of the Aviva, isn't it? So yeah, that kind of tells you, even in these circumstances, just how big the rugby audience in Wales is. But yeah, for the derby, uh, yeah, 6,300 I think is a good crowd. You have to remember people are a bit rugby fatigued as well
Yeah.
after the World Cup. And if you've spent, someone challenged me on Twitter when I pointed that out, and they're like, "Oh, surely people should be more into rugby now because of the World Cup." And I'm like, well, say you're the only rugby watcher in your household, and you've explained to your family or your other half, whoever it is, why you've got to watch 4 rugby matches a weekend for 2 months, and then you just go, that's finished now. I'm just going to head out and go to a rugby match now. How some people might feel they might not be able to do that. But it was a nice crowd, and the Scarlets are a great example of when the team's doing well, the crowds do come. I think that's it's not just a purely Welsh fan thing, but speaking to some of the people around the game in Wales, there are more fans than the attendances suggest. There are just I don't know how to phrase this in a correct way. When the teams are doing well, they do come out and they do buy the merch and spend the money in things. It's just you have to give fans a reason to get excited, and I don't blame or criticize fans at all for that. I think that's completely fair. Sport is a hobby, and if you're not enjoying it, you're under no obligation, in my opinion, to continue doing it, regardless. That spending money, particularly on fuel and things. So, but yeah, it was a nice experience, and it was good for me to be there and take it in.
And just on those attendance figures, for me, it was such a strange scenario this weekend with the Ospreys taking on the Sharks in London, the Welsh national team playing the Babas, and then there was still a derby game between the Scarlets, obviously, and Cardiff. But yeah, I'm just kind of, I guess my question is just in terms of those attendance figures. There was a lot of controversy over the Sharks figure. Apparently, there were some suggestions that it was quite a big figure, but then anybody at the game certainly said that the figures are way off. Do you know if they're including season ticket holders in those attendance figures still? I know that was definitely a thing with the with the URC when it was in its previous iterations or whatever. But I don't know if do you have any idea if season ticket holders are still factored into those figures?
So I've heard people say that yes, match day attendances do include season ticket holders, whether they turn up or not. Apparently, that's what Rodney Parade still do. I don't know whether that's what everywhere still does. I don't know whether this game would be an exception because although it was an Ospreys home game, it wasn't in Swansea. So to just count the season ticket holders. So Twickenham Stoop, I think the capacity is about 15,000, and apparently the attendance was 7,100, which looked about right for what you could see on telly. I did have a very quick exchange with a Sharks fan on Twitter, and he said it was a great night out. So yeah, I think you could call that experiment a qualified success, probably.
I think so. Yeah, and they're trying something different as well. And we can talk about that particular game in a little bit, but I guess I wanted to move on to at the moment is something we, as podcasters, are we podcasters now? I guess. Wait, well, look, we do a podcast. We can call us as podcasters now, but Squidge, obviously, we're like, that's the big story of the week. His massive, I think he did a 40+ minute analysis of the World Cup final, and it's been, the copyright police have been out and they've taken down his video as of time of recording here on the 7th of November at 9 o'clock. What's your take on this? Like, is it rugby shooting itself in the foot again, or can you see it from the broadcaster's perspective, or what's your take on this whole situation?
That's definitely been the reaction from the fans, isn't it? Is broadcasters or rugby shooting itself in the foot. It's definitely two fingers up to rugby fans. So obviously Squidge has been someone who has been very proactive in growing the game and introducing it to new audiences and using I was going to call it new media there, but you can't really call it new anymore. To help people enjoy the game more. And I know a lot of people were really looking forward to his video. Apparently, in the time that it was up, it took a lot of views. And obviously, yeah, we know from our last week that there's a lot of South African fans that are really reveling in their World Cup victory, which absolutely they should. So we've benefited massively from that boost in views, and I'm sure that video would have done huge bits for Squidge. And also on a personal point of view, the amount of time and effort I know he would have put into that, that must be really galling. And I'm sure he would have had, because all World Cup, he's not been able to use footage. And then for this game, he did use footage. And I'm sure he would have had a nod from someone to say that he could use footage. And then they've gone back on that, which is disappointing. And all the fans are really upset. And I think that the anger comes as much from of World Rugby, you're not doing any of this yourself, so why are you trying to stop someone else doing it? And apparently Squidge has said that it is someone from World Rugby themselves rather than like ITV or a broadcaster or whoever who's claimed it. Apparently it's World Rugby themselves. Now World Rugby are in bed with the broadcaster. They've obviously got Rugby Pass TV, and they have a relationship with Sky, through Sky New Zealand, which is how the whole Rugby Pass TV thing came about. So what you've worked in the industry, mate? You worked for, I think it was Sky you used to work for. So from a broadcaster's point of view, where do you think they're coming at it from? Are they just attacking a little guy just because they can? Are they that greedy, or do you think, I don't know, is it all about the spreadsheets at the end of the day?
I think you could be right, because like there are always two sides to these things, right? And look, we're both massive rugby fans. We're both big Squidge rugby fans. We know the value of his content. I want his content up there. You want his content up there. But I guess just looking at it from the other perspective, these broadcasters pay enormous sums of money for the rights to absolutely everything. For it, like they pay, like some broadcasters just go pay massive sums of money just for highlights. Other broadcasters go for highlights plus games, or they just go for games. So we know that, and especially with the World Cup as well, there were so many different broadcasters in so many different territories. But what my take from the whole clip thing and the whole situation regarding sharing World Cup clips was, it was based on territory. So like, if you obviously, whenever like you, for example, shared a clip, or anybody in the UK shared a clip from ITV, I couldn't watch it in the Republic of Ireland. And that made sense because ITV didn't have the rights to broadcast it here. RTE and Virgin Media did. So that kind of made sense. And that's standard, like that's normal. Like if you share a URC clip from Viaplay, I usually can't watch it. And that to me makes sense. I shouldn't be able to watch it because Premier Sports and all the other broadcasters in Ireland who have paid for those rights have played for exclusivity, and that kind of makes sense. Now you can obviously, there's still that argument that doesn't help growing the game, but from a broadcaster's perspective, you can obviously see why they wouldn't be happy with that. When you think about the money involved. But yeah, I just think, especially with this one, like, and because, as you mentioned, he went down the video route, he obviously had permission from one of the broadcasters, and I think he might work with Stan Sports. I think I've seen some of his videos before, and there've been a couple of clips from them. So I wonder, like, did he get permission from one of them, and then maybe a UK broadcaster's made a complaint, or as suggested by him, is it somebody from World Rugby going, no, you have to, if you're going to broadcast this in the UK or anywhere outside of Australia, you need to have the rights. I'm not sure. It's really strange. Jim Hamilton, who is involved with Rugby Pass TV and where Rugby, he did kind of put out a tweet, and like obviously he was poking fun at it, but he did suggest, like, blame AI for this. Like, was it just some, like, was it AI that just picked up this clip that shouldn't have been shared without permission or whatnot? I really don't know, but I just, from a broadcaster's perspective, it does make sense. But again, it's just rugby shooting itself in the foot. Like, we need to grow the sport. We need more young people watching it. Young people watch YouTube. Squidge does a great job. So it's frustrating, but there is a different take on this from the broadcaster's perspective. But yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, some people have thrown out, should there be a content creators clause in the broadcast rights deal. Is that something that exists? Is that something that there's a precedent in other sports? Because I'm thinking about football in the UK, where I can think of one, maybe two YouTube channels which have access to use the actual footage from the games, and huge platforms like The Athletic, for example, don't have access rights to the video. And I can think of, Formula One is another example where creators don't have access to use the footage. So it is. Are we holding rugby to a different standard, or are there sports out there that do allow creators to use footage?
I think there are, and I think especially the NBA. Now, I just don't understand. I don't know enough about the agreements the formal agreements that have in place, but I know the NBA is definitely a sport where content creators do get access to it, and they can share on social media a lot more. But you're dead right. Like this could, like I know it sounds like, and I know we touched on this when we spoke about the new World League. But I did listen to Jim Hamilton's take on this, and he did say, who voted on that? It's the big and Andy Good. They said who voted on that were the Six Nations countries and the Sanzar countries. Like it wasn't necessarily World Rugby saying, like, it's not as if World Rugby like we don't want promotion and relegation. It's obviously the home nations voting for their best interests. Do they want promotion or relegation? I don't know. They want to maximize their revenues and everything. So I just don't know, like if this was more a broadcaster complaint, or maybe just the way World Rugby sold their rights for this particular World Cup, and maybe this was a clause that all of the broadcasters were like, no, if somebody's going to share a clip in our region, it has to be from us, directly from us, which is disappointing, certainly. But the money, there's money behind all of this, isn't there? And but apparently, we will give a shout out to the URC. They've been very generous, according to a good few content creators that I've seen on Twitter with their rights. But we both know the URC is the best league, so we're not surprised there, are we? But this Squidge thing, it's definitely it's frustrating. But you'd wonder, is this World Rugby's fault or is this the broadcaster's fault? That's the question for me. I'm sure World Rugby want to bloody well grow the game, especially with everything that's going on and the rugby being potentially in crisis in certain parts of the world.
Yeah. Anyway, you mentioned URC best league there, so why don't we jump into that then and talk about things that make us happy?
Beautiful segue.
So I'll go first this week because you went first last week. So Welsh regions. So I was at the derby between Cardiff and Scarlets, played in Parc y Scarlets. Scarlets came out with a win that I think we badly needed, because I think if we hadn't won this, it would have really looked like we'd have been wondering where our next win is coming from. I like to jump into the stats and things, and I did a deeper dive on the Scarlets pod. But I feel like the prediction that I made before the game was that I looked at the two team sheets, and Scarlets had Gareth Davis and Verfa Fita back in the team. And I looked at it and I thought, those two are head and shoulders better than any other player on either side. So they should be enough for us to win it. And that proved to be the case. So Fafita made the most meters of any Scarlets player. Gareth Davis got a try and 2 try assists and ran the game. He was on for the full 80. Fafita also was big in the line out for us, was our biggest line out taker. So it kind of came true that the difference between the two sides was those two players. That the underlying numbers for the Scarlets, if you look on the stats, depending on which stats website you use, which is something I'll talk about on Twitter tomorrow, the Scarlets still had some underlying issues which are still present from the previous games, like speed of ball from the ruck, things like that, where if you look at the stats, Cardiff had the better of the game in some areas. It's one of those things where the stats can lie, because I was in the stadium watching the game, and in the second half, the Scarlets were the only team in it for most of it, to be honest. And there was a bit of niggle around the scrums as well, where Cardiff were getting really rewarded in the scrums, but it's debatable. Some people didn't like the referee's interpretation. I'm a Scarlets fan, so I have my incredibly biased opinion on that. And I think I'm right, but there you go. So, yeah, like I said, important win for the Scarlets. I don't think it's the end of the world for Cardiff. And yeah, the Lions next up for the Scarlets at home. Lions will talk about a little bit more in a bit about that match with Benetton, but that is not an easy game as the table suggests. So yeah, they're just happy to get 5 points on the board, really, and it's a bit of a monkey off the back of the team. So I think the question now is for Dwayne Peel, the head coach, he's going to have a load of Welsh players back available. Sadly, Sam Costello is now out, which is a big shame. But will Dwayne be able to resist the urge of throwing all of the Scarlets internationals back into the team and kind of taking away the momentum that some of the young kids have got now who have been playing? Like we've got 21, 22, 23-year-olds in the team. And I think to rip them out of the team at this point now isn't necessarily going to do anyone any favors. Anyway, speaking of teams that are going to get their internationals back, apparently one team who is going to play their internationals again will be the Ospreys. So they were in London. So our first ever podcast was reacting to the news that the Ospreys were going to play this match in London. That happened on Friday. They beat the Sharks. I think it was 20 points to 5. I can't remember. Check in the background for me, will you? It's it scored 3 tries to 1. The Sharks scored first, but then it was offensive masterclass from the Ospreys. They kind of scored their 3 tries a bit by accident, which I had a bit of fun poking at some Ospreys fans on Twitter, where one try where they were down in the Sharks on their try line a couple of times, and they just couldn't find a way over. And then Owen Williams throws a bad pass to Walsh, which the defender overreads, and then Walsh all he has to do is flop over the line. And then another try was a charge down kick that Max Nagy picked up and ran the length. And then the final try that they scored was Kieran Williams grounding a try that a Sharks player failed to ground over his try line that bubbled free, and he just tapped it down. So Ospreys still not the best attacking team to watch in the world, but I still stand by what my prediction was of they will be the strongest Welsh team this year, and they've already started getting multiple points on the board. So for me, they're performing as they should. Sharks, not a great start to the season, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think they're winless so far, but they have been on tour. So, and we know South African teams can vary a bit on tour, and obviously they've not had all their big stars back. So there is that kind of context to give to it. And then there's the Dragons, who, I won't lie, this was on at the same time as Scarlets Cardiff, and I wasn't in a rush to look up the highlights of this one. It was quite a predictable scoreline. It was respectable at half time, 17 points to 7. And apparently the Dragons' 2 tries were good, and apparently they did have some bright spells in the game. But, it's Dragons away at Munster. It went as you would expect. From a Dragons point of view, they were missing a lot of forwards. Their backline, I actually thought, was pretty close to their first choice backline. They moved Steph Hughes to inside centre, which I think is his best position, and probably they were Rio Dyer away and maybe a fullback here or there away from their best team, although they had Angus O'Brien at fullback, and I think that's his best position. But apart from that, it was pretty as expected. I'm sure from the Irish point of view, mate, Munster would have got what they expected out of that game.
Yeah, it was a much improved performance compared to their last outing against Benetton. On the negative side, though, it looks like Carberry's picked up yet another injury, so there's a bit of a problem there for Munster at 10. So I read today that Carberry's going to be out for a couple of months, which is a massive setback for him, because we all know his story from last season, how he's bounced back at the beginning of the season. So yeah, I think they might be in a bit of trouble there at 10. It'd be interesting to see if they have to get in cover or not. But yeah, that was definitely one of the negatives. But look, they got back to winning ways. Can't speak about this match and not mention Calvin Nash. He was absolutely excellent. He's been good now for a couple of seasons. Like he's really finding good form as well this season. It looks like Snyman as well has picked up an injury.
He's had surgery after the World Cup. So I think it was one of those cases where he was putting it off until after the World Cup, and apparently now he's going to be off for a while.
Yeah. So that's really, so those 2 guys out, and there's obviously a rumor floating around as well that Jean Klein may be recruited to I know Kalon's defended this, and he's saying that it's like he's been offered a good contract by Munster, but yeah, he's been touted that he was potentially leaving Munster at the end of this current season and going to the top 14. So it'll be interesting to see, because he's obviously now an NIQ and non-Irish qualified player. So it'll be interesting to see if Munster can hold on to him. I think he will be a massive loss. But look, let's not get too negative. I think it was a good Munster performance. I love when they play in Cork in Musgrave Park. They always seem to get a really good crowd in. So I think that was a good positive. And look, they're playing an exciting brand. Like, they seem to of rugby, that they seem to have picked up where they left off last season. So yeah, I think Munster are on track to have a good season. And let's move on then to the other kind of big game. The big game of the weekend for me really was Connacht the Ulster. That was, I think it was 7:35 kickoff on Saturday evening. And yeah, it looks like Connacht are the only team now with 3 wins from 3 games. They're sitting top of the URC, which is a lovely sight for me.
For audio listeners, Caelan is not Caelan, sorry mate, and Ender is smiling his head off so much so that I'm worried his head is going to fold in on itself.
Well, this might be the only time I get to smile like this, so I'll enjoy it while it lasts. But I'll have to say, yeah, Connacht were kind of, they didn't play well for about 55 minutes. At one stage, they were 17 points to 3 down. But fair play to them, they came back and they put in a strong last 30 minutes, last 25 minutes, which is really promising. And before this game, I did watch the quarterfinals. So let's not forget, like last season, Connacht knocked Ulster out in the quarterfinals up in Ravenhill, which was a massive result. And the way Connacht won that game was at the breakdown, the amount of turnovers. That's when I think, Seamus Hurley-Langton really made a name for himself. He won so many turnovers. Conor Oliver was brilliant in that game. And then I think that was, like, it was interesting listening to the Ulster coach, Dan McFarlane, before this game, saying that was definitely an area that they lost against Connacht. That was an area they were going to target in this game, and that's exactly what unfolded. Ulster were definitely on top at the breakdown, especially for that first half. They won numerous turnovers. Connacht, with a couple of sloppy plays, they didn't hold on to the ball that well. But a lot of that was down to a really strong Ulster defence, and they dominated that breakdown. And unfortunately, Seamus Hurley-Langton, he went off after about a minute or two with a head knock. Thankfully, he looks okay. He seems to be passing all the tests since then. So I think his lack of presence was missed, and not just in terms of winning turnovers, but in terms of Connacht retaining the ball, and also he's a really strong ball carrier. So yeah, look, it was good to see Connacht come back. First start for Jack Carty. He had a pretty okay game. Yeah, like he smashed.
So JJ's out, isn't he?
Yeah, it looks like that injury isn't too serious though. So it'll be interesting to see when they're both fit who starts. I know for the opening game of the season they were both fit, and JJ got the nod. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But Carty overall, he had a decent game. He did miss a very, very kickable kick towards the end that could have cost them, but then I don't know if you saw the clip, he absolutely made up for it and kicked a beautiful crossfield kick to win it, really. So I think he overall had a decent game. And yeah, I can't watch Connacht games and review them without just giving praise again for the centres. I know you're probably sick of hearing me, but Cathal Ford, this young guy, scored again. He was absolutely brilliant. And Tom Farrell next to him, again, for me, he's one of their standout players. He had a great game. Blade, as usual, had a really strong game, some lovely breaks. It did pick up an injury, but it looks like it isn't too serious. And one thing I just want to highlight as well, Connacht's line out is really good. They're winning a lot of their own ball, and they're disrupting so much ball. Like they're just really enjoyable to watch. And finally, one thing I would like to say is, I don't know if you mightn't have heard this, but Sexton's brother is involved.
I heard the comms say that the Sexton name, and I assumed it was just a coincidence.
Yeah, it's Sexton's brother, Mark Sexton, and he's the assistant attack coach.
Right.
So if you look at Connacht's attack, it is really exciting. They do run some really nice lines. They play tight. They play wide. So yeah, it's just an interesting kind of like, I hadn't heard much about him at all. I don't think many people had. But he's been given a lot of praise for Connacht's attack so far. this season. So yeah, definitely a name to keep an eye out for, certainly.
Just quickly on Rugby Brothers, Sam Warburton has got an identical twin who was a physio at Cardiff. So Sam was playing for Cardiff, and his twin brother Ben would come on and treat him. And so people would be like, "I'm seeing double here, man. What's happening?" But Ben is now a physio at the Scarlets, so I think there's a lot of double takes happening going on for us.
But yeah, so yeah, Connacht, yeah, 3 from 3. So we'll see. They've got a couple of tough fixtures now. They're going to be away from home for a couple of weeks. They've got Edinburgh away this coming weekend. So that should be a really good test to see where they're really at. Leinster,
just on Ulster before we leave. So I was watching the highlights of it, and I couldn't help but notice how young that Ulster team looked. It looks like kids in some of the positions. Like I think their 10 looks about 15 years old. Is it a new team for them? Or are they dealing with something?
Yeah, I suppose I should have added that context. Like they did have literally 20 players unavailable for this game. And listening to Dan McFarland speak before and after the game, he did say that they were always going to rotate for this game. Like Dave Shanahan at scrum half, that was his first start at scrum half since 2021. Which is a bit of a mad stat, but they do have a 6-day turnaround. They've got Munster at home in Ravenhill on Friday. That's looking like a sellout, by the way. So obviously there are a couple of factors there, but no, that 10, he is young, but he's actually a Munster player. He's a former Munster player, Jake Flannery. He's still in his early 20s. To be honest, he probably would have been man of the match if Connacht hadn't come back. He played really well. And he spoke, I listened to an interview that he did after the game as well. He spoke very well and he was very honest. Like he did make a mistake. Like Cal Ford did run in, like he ran a nice line off a line out, but he probably shouldn't have run in so easy. And Flannery was very open about that after the game and saying he should have had that. But yeah, he's actually a former Munster player. Billy Burns was on the bench. He did come on for a bit.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's it. 20 players unavailable, and they were always going to rotate.
Yeah.
But Ulster were, I don't want to take that away. Like Ulster were excellent as well. And again, they absolutely dominated that breakdown for about 50 minutes.
Yeah, it seems to be a thing because the Dragons put out a story the other day as well about having 20 players unavailable, whether that was through Wales call-ups or injuries and things. And the Scarlets have an annual story that comes out about having 20 players unavailable. I don't think Cardiff Rugby currently employ 20 players. So I wonder if this is like a meeting of storms here where you've got players coming back from the World Cup. They're either picked up a knock and they were carrying a knock through that, or they were putting off a surgery in order to play in it, or you got the players who stayed at the clubs and then they had a really long preseason, a really long break between games, and then not proper warm-up games, and then straight into the season. I wonder if those two things are just leading to injuries galore all over the place.
Yeah, I think you could be right, and like I haven't seen enough of the stats to suggest otherwise. It could like with a lot of these things, it's just bad luck as well, isn't it? I saw a really interesting tweet a while ago though. It might have been Progressive Rugby tweeted, like Harlequins have obviously, I think it's well known now, they do very, very little contact training. And their injuries have plummeted. Like they've so many more, especially last season, they had so many more players available for longer because there were less injuries. So like I'm sure there are so many different factors in that. They talk about those 4G pitches being bad for injuries.
Yeah. So who's just had a 4G? Who's just had a 4G put in? Is it you?
Ulster. Well, then you're looking at Connacht though, and Connacht have that, and like now Connacht do have some injuries, but nothing near like what Ulster's list is like at the moment. So like I think you'd have to do a lot more research into those what we call them plastic pitches to see if
because they're quite common.
Yeah, but I have heard one of the studies is there are less injuries, but of the injuries that do occur, they are more serious. So that's like definitely one of the studies that I heard. Yeah,
it's like knees and ankles. Like when people land or twist, the boot gets caught a bit more easily or something.
Yeah, and I was listening to Dobson as well before the Stormers game against Glasgow, and he said that they really it was their first time, I think, for a lot of those players even playing on a 4G pitch, and they really learned a lesson against Glasgow. Like they were not used to that pitch, and he like Dobson said, one of the reasons they lost by so many points was because they were not used to that fast track. And yeah, exactly. In terms of how just you connect with the ground, it sounds really strange, but yeah, there's a lot more give and grass and everything. So yeah, it's an interesting talking point. I'm sure we can discuss it on a later pod, but yeah, I think we definitely more research needed there. But yeah, so many teams, especially top 14 teams as well, are getting these pitches in. But yeah, and it's an interesting area for sure.
What about Leinster then? I cut you off in your prime there.
Yeah, look, they got back to winning ways. On paper, like I was a bit nervous with my predictor league. Like I did have them Leinster down to win, but I was a bit nervous. But then after about 15, 20 minutes, I wasn't. Like on paper, for me, that Edinburgh team was better than Leinster's team. They should have done better. And they just simply didn't. Leinster just, the conveyor belt just keeps, spitting out these unbelievable talents. And they just played really well. I think Edinburgh, were just not there for me. I don't know.
So they had Kinghorn playing.
They did. Like they had a very strong team out, which was frustrating. And they Ben Healy at 10, former Munster player. But they weren't there for me. The confidence wasn't there. And it was, business as usual for Leinster.
Stat for you on Ben Healy: he has kicked 1.009 kilometers in 3 games. That's his total kick distance. He is obviously top in the URC stats for that. And that kind of, we knew he had a long boot, but like I think he's gonna take the mick this season with how far he's gonna kick.
Because obviously, like there's a lot of change in Leinster. We discussed this in our last pod. So, and they did lose their opening game, but it does feel like they're finding their groove again. And obviously, they've got Nienaber to come in now, and who knows.
That's a good opportunity to jump to our listeners' questions. So, we'll jump to this particular one. We'll come back to the rest of them later. So a question from Miles on Twitter. So we tweeted out before the show any questions for us. And guys, if you want to leave a comment below asking us a question, we'll bookmark it for ourselves and then answer it in the next show. If you want to DM us on Twitter, or I don't know, come and find me and tell me to my face, I suppose that's okay as well. So question from Miles: Will Jacques hit the ground running at Leinster, and will they continue to dominate with him at the helm?
Who knows? Like, for me, like everything you hear about him is that he's absolutely excellent. But like I don't know if you saw that image from the Springboks coaching ticket basically during the World Cup final, and all of the coaches are looking at Razzie, and you can see Razzie's making all those calls, and obviously it's been announced now that Razzie's going to take over the head coach role for the Springboks. So I wonder. Wasn't. Yeah, so was it just a Razzie show the whole time? And like I know Nienaber, when he was involved with Munster, he was involved with the defence, and he got high praise for that. So I think he'd be an excellent fit. I think he's I'd say they paid some big bucks to get him in, and it could be what Leinster need, because they have a good defence, but do they need to take to that next level and have somebody like that come in? Like everybody was singing Stuart Lancaster's praises, but ultimately they didn't make it last season, did they? They didn't get over the line against La Rochelle, and maybe it's the defence. Maybe that's the area they really need to focus on, and if it is, then Nienaber is your guy, I think. And obviously he's built all this experience now, and he does have strong connections, obviously, South Africa. So will we see some potentially South African players come over to Leinster? Like that's a real possibility. Like we've heard this week that Michael Alaltoa, the Samoan international, is leaving allegedly next season to top 14. Like he's going to be a big loss. Will we see a South African come in here? That'd be interesting to see. But I think he'd be a good fit. I really do. And from all accounts, from what you hear about Leo Cullen, he's really good at stepping back and letting somebody come in, and like it's not the Leo show. He's happy.
Is Cullen going upstairs or something?
So the way it worked with Stuart Lancaster was that Lancaster ran all of the training, and I think he did most of the attack and everything, but Leo kind of he did all the media work. He did a lot of work with the forwards. and apparently he had a massive say on selection as well. So I assume it's going to be the same.
Yeah.
So I think Nienaber will be senior coach. I think that was that was the title previous anyway, senior coach, and then Leo Cullen is head coach.
Okay, I was looking up how Leinster set up their coaching ticket, and it's interesting. They don't say like forwards coach, backs coach, or something. They just have Leo Cullen, and then they have assistant coaches, and then they have someone like Sean O'Brien, who is a specific coach for a specific area. But like Robin McBride, who was, I think, forwards coach for Wales, he's just down as an assistant coach, and you would assume that he is the forwards coach, but that's not his official title. It's just assistant. So it's interesting that Leinster doing it different, and I think bringing in this new person from outside is new ideas is always good. You've got to keep it fresh, and you are right that there are things that Leinster could improve on. Or having said that, with some of the retirements that they've had, and with this new coach coming in, I do expect there to be a bit of a storming period where they have to figure it all out again, and then they'll come back. So maybe they might have, you say a down season with Leinster as them like finishing third or something, but they might drop down from their peak a little bit for a while, and then I think they'll be back at it.
Yeah, because they have the talent. It just might take Jack that time to enforce his views or whatnot, or to get his style of play across, or his message or whatnot. But yeah, it's I think it's a really smart move by Leinster. It really is. Talk about a high profile coach,
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be really interesting to watch Leinster this season. And that probably runs it up for the Irish team, certainly. But I know that you were watching, like, what other games this weekend stood out for you in terms of URC? I know I watched the Lions v Benetton game in Treviso. You caught that game as well, didn't you?
I caught the second half of that, and I think the second half was the best bit of it to catch. A low scoring game, 15 points to 10, but it looked like a really intense game. Everyone's so excited about Benetton this season. I think Fekitoa got his first try for them.
He did, yeah.
And yeah, really a team to watch. They've got the checkbook out, and it's great to see them getting results with it as well. But it was all about the final play in this game, wasn't it? It was all about that. I likened it to the All Blacks versus Ireland in the quarterfinal of it just kept going and going and going and going well into the red, and Lions managed to force their way from deep within their own 22 up until Benetton half, only for Lamoureux, the Italian captain, to step in and turn the ball over. So it was a great finish and a really high quality bit of play, wouldn't you say, mate?
Yeah, and like the Lions have been thereabouts in every game. Like I know we're only 3 games into the season, but I think before this game they're average like they're losing by less than a score. Like they're really in there, and they're not a bad side at all. And let's not forget, like they're playing away from home. I think they'll finish mid-table probably. They're not a bad team. They've got some really good players, especially Marius Lowe in the centre. He is a fabulous player. But yeah, Benetton, and you know what I liked about the game as well was just seeing the crowd. Like Benetton, I liked
it was
again.
A good crowd, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know we spoke about the Scarlets stadium. Like I think Benetton have done it really well as well. They don't play in a massive stadium. They play in like a purpose-built rugby stadium that has 2 decent stands, and they seem to get a good atmosphere. So I thought that was really positive as well. So obviously, the Treviso crowd are getting behind them, which I think is really good for the league, especially when we discussed about a bit of a drop off in interest in rugby because everyone's rugbyed out after the World Cup. It is great to see a team like Benetton bring in all those superstars and also actually get a decent crowd in as well. But yeah, it was a brilliant game. And I forget who scored the winning try, not the winning try, sorry, but the try that got the Lions really back into it. He was the substitute prop.
The replacement tight head, yeah.
Yeah, he is a big boy. I'd really like to see him play. I think he's in his early 20s.
Is he?
The commentator
he was like 36.
He's in his early 20s, and the commentator said he was 158 kgs. Now I did look up the official stats. He's down as 153. He's a big lad.
That's still big.
That's still big. But like their scrum. See, what the reason I think they're going to do well this season is that they have a solid set piece. which I think is so important. Like, I don't want to get too cliched, and I know you did your thread on, everyone thinks the Springboks are just massive forwards, and we know they're not. But traditionally, Springboks teams and South African teams have good set piece, right? And that's certainly the case with the Lions. And I think that's why they are where they are, and that they're hanging in those games, and they will get some good victories this season. And it's because they have a really strong set piece.
Yeah, definitely. Their South African compatriots were in Zebre as well, or Parma, I should say, as the Bulls beat Zebre. I think it ended 54-29, but with 10 minutes to go, it was 29-35, and Zebre had really come back into the game. So Zebre got a try bonus point in this game. Bulls, I've been tipping the Bulls to be amazing all this season, and they did pull away in the last 10 minutes with 3 tries. Kind of the floodgates opened when I think Zebre realised that they had nothing left to play for. But yeah, again, Zebre, there's a lot of people in Wales really worried about Zebre this season, of oh, we might lose to these because they look exciting. They're scoring tries, and yes, they're letting some in, but eventually they will win a few games. I absolutely do not think that they will go the season winless at all.
Yeah, they're going to have a big scalp this season, I think. And yeah, I didn't tip the Bulls to put that highest score up on them. But I think the Bulls, when you looked at Bulls team, especially that back row, it's not surprising that they had that big of a win. But I think it's good for them because they were underwhelming last season. I don't want to move on without mentioning that Lions player. I feel bad. But his name is Bakanye, and he's 24 years old.
My goodness.
But he is going to be a great player.
That is a lot of cake to eat in 24 years.
Yeah, so he is. I think he's going to be he's really good in the scrum, and he makes some big tackles. I really like this player. And they obviously the Lions, they carried Usadi. Was it 2 seasons ago? Then he went to the Sharks, and now he's playing in the top 14. So it looks like he's a decent backup there as well, which is good to see. And yeah, good to see young talent coming through there. I think that probably wraps up our URC review.
Just Glasgow Stormers was the only one. I think it finished 20 points to 9. It looks like an exciting game. Glasgow, again, like Edinburgh, playing their Scotland stars. Again, Tuipulotu got a nice first phase try. Stormers went down to 13 at one point. There was a bit of argy-bargy. South Africans don't seem to be travelling well this season. I think it's 1 win in 8 away games they've had so far this year cumulatively. So, maybe a bit of hope for the rest of us, because I don't see many of us going down there and getting a result.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we do some more listeners' questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I'm going to take the first one. Lee from the Rap Podcast asks, what is the essential headwear for podcasters this winter? The answer to that, Lee, is bucket hats. So I've got my one here. But all kits manufacturers are doing bucket hats this season. So VX3 do this Dragons one, and Nike do loads. So Nike do a really cool Fiji one. So the Fiji change kits with the pink palm leaves and everything. They do one like that. And the Nike, for as much as I love their designs, and I do, they do the same merch for every team they do. So if you want like a bucket hat, just look on Nike's website. So bucket hats is the answer to that question. Next question. I've asked you the one about Leinster coaches. Right. So other bit of obscure news that came out this week is that England A are playing a game against Portugal, and it's during the Six Nations, and it's also during the Rugby Europe Championship as well. It's in the midst of it all, so it must be in a down week of that. It's being played at the Twickenham Stoop, and Nuno Madeira, hi Nuno, writes in to asks us, what do we think of that, and do we think that it's the tier ones putting out A teams against the tier twos is something that we'll see a lot more of in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I don't think the timing is great, but I think it is good that more people on this side of the world, like I know Portugal aren't far from these isles, but it's still good to, like, there will be interest in that game because it's England A. And like a lot of most of those players, everybody will be familiar with. So I think that's definitely a good thing. It's just that the timing for me is poor. I didn't realize it was in that window. But we all know that the rugby calendar is broken and that there's not enough space for enough games. But yeah, it just feels like a bit of a, it's just meh. It just, that's what it is for me. I think it's grand, but like we want to see Portugal playing England's first side. We don't want to see them playing the A side, but I think this is a step in the right direction. And I don't think,
Exactly.
yeah, that's what it is for me. Like we have to take the positive from that. And maybe that's like maybe that's good from, like, maybe this is a good starting point. And maybe, yeah, again, as I said, like maybe, like I know it probably won't get the eyeballs, but again, there will be a lot of rugby chat. They'll be more interested in rugby at that time during the Six Nations. So maybe there will be that actually a bit of interest. And I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit daft there, but like it's just
I'll
like you were
certainly,
saying, like,
I'll certainly be very interested in it.
yeah. So I think
But
it's a step in the right direction, right? What's your take?
I agree with you. I would much rather see Portugal play England proper than play an A team. I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, with the new Nations League and things, can we field? Can the Tier 1 nations field A teams or B or A teams or B teams, second strings, and go into the Tier 2 nations?" And I think my answer to that is, well, firstly, the Tier 2 championship is coming, so there'll be no space for that. We actually talked about this topic a little bit in our South America deep dive link in Pop Out Banner, where we talked about Argentina 15, so which is Argentina's second string, and they do play against all of the other South American teams and a couple of others as well, and they lose quite regularly to Uruguay and beat the rest. And then you've got Australia A also played fixtures this summer as well, and obviously got the Maori All Blacks. So Australia A lost to Tonga but beat Portugal. So that kind of gives you an idea of the level. What I would also say is, guys, don't big up in your minds how good the Tier 1 second strings would be. Because if you think about it for a second, that game in this Portugal game in particular, Portugal will be coming into that. It'll be a huge game for them. It's their cup final, and it will be right in the middle of their Rugby Europe campaign, so they'll be running hot. Whereas this will be an England team that will be thrown together, will have never played with each other before, and will probably never play together since. Also, bear in mind, because it's during the Six Nations, it will be the level of player that it will be 30 odd players in the England squad for the Six Nations, and then there might be another half a dozen players who would have been in that squad who would be injured. So you're probably realistically talking the 40th best player down in England. Now England has a huge playing pool, and that mightn't be so bad, but that is the kind of level that we're talking about. And like I said, it will be a very thrown together team. Now, in countries like England, and I think France, South Africa, obviously the All Blacks would be fine regardless. And I think Ireland, because of your structures you've got, could field a competitive B team. I was trying to think earlier who would be in Wales's A team if we did one. And you take out all the players who would be playing for the first squad, and it is literally like you are scratching your heads trying to think who would play for that team, because we've got a crisis at fly half as it is at the moment. So you are trying to, like, it wouldn't be a good team. And the question is, if you look at how well Portugal performed in the World Cup, beating Fiji, and then you look at a team like Georgia, would England Saxons or whoever it would be definitely beat Georgia, or would definitely beat Samoa? If you look at how close Samoa got to England's first team in the World Cup, I don't know, man. And I think Francisco Isaac mentioned it before about some things they've done in the past. I think if they tried it and then the Tier 1s lost a couple of games, I think they would just pull the plug, and they would go, oh, never mind about that, and not do it, because the optics for losing for the Tier 1s is just too bad. And I do believe that teams like particularly Georgia and Uruguay and Samoa, if they played the A teams of particularly like who would play in Scotland's A team? Like, where are they getting those players from? They've only got 2 pro sides. That's kind of my point, is I don't overestimate how good the tier 1A teams would be, because I think they would struggle to beat a lot of these tier 2 nations that are closing the gap on tier 1.
Yeah. Well, look, hopefully it's a step in the right direction. I'd be interesting. We'll have to get Francisco back on and get his take on this whole situation now, and what next for Portugal. Like, we also those clips that he shared of how cracked some of the fans went in Portugal when they got home from the World Cup, which is great to see. That's what we want to see. So we'll have to get him back on.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Shall we talk a bit about wrap up of all of the other rugby that happened during the week, mate? So let's start with WXV. So it was just WXV 1 that was remaining to be played. What do you think of WXV? Has it been a success, or I don't want to call it a missed opportunity? What's your take on it, mate?
A step in the right direction again. It's investment in women's rugby. It was shown on TV. I know it wasn't on any linear channels, but hopefully that'll change next time round. It's a step in the right direction. It was always going to be, I think, tough in the inaugural season, and like some of the attendances didn't look great, did they? But I think it's a starting point. Let's take it from here. Let's get more people knowing about Rugby Pass TV, what the hell it is. Let's try to get some linear broadcasters on board, get more people talking about it. But the timing as well, like, it was around the Men's World Cup timing, so that was always going to affect viewing figures and attendance figures. But yeah, it's produced some pretty good rugby, right? Like, and the fact that we could, like, when we first started this pod, we were complaining about the lack of rugby coverage. Now we have it on Rugby Pass TV, so I think it's a step in the right direction. What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction. I like it whenever the women's game does something different, like doesn't just blindly follow the men's structures, because we all believe the men's structures should be changed. So it's nice to see that the women's team have done that, and it does look like it was highly competitive. A lot of the games, particularly in WXV 1, were very close and could have gone either way, particularly between New Zealand, Canada, and France and Australia. All looked like they could all beat each other on any given day. So that was cool. I agree with you. I think holding it at the same time as the Men's World Cup wasn't the best, and I think October generally would have been a bad month to hold it in. Also, having it in New Zealand when 4 of the 6 WXV1 teams were Northern Hemisphere based, I think was also a bit of an own goal. It meant like the big audiences in England and Wales and things were all asleep, like when the games were on. And if you're dedicated enough to get up at 4 a.m. to watch it, fair play to you. But when it's not even on proper TV, it's on ITVX or something. I can understand why maybe some people missed it. And I think the last thing I'd say is we have learned that a women's Six Nations team should not be in WXV3. I think we have learned that no lower than WXV2. I mean, even Scotland won that quite easily. I think, obviously, I don't know where Italy finished in it. But, and finally, there was, I don't mean to go in on it, because I really want to encourage it and things, but not that it needs for me to encourage it, but there being 6 teams in WXV1, but they only played 3 games. It's things like that that are just a bit, it's like a little bit meh, like you say.
Yeah.
So give it a year's grace. It was the first time they tried it. Hopefully they'll take some learnings, and then next time it will be all the better for it.
Exactly. And then things in terms of the top 14, very interesting season, right? I don't know if you caught the poll. It was Toulouse they were playing, wasn't it? Sunday evening.
That's right. So I didn't know. So first thing I'll say is that Jaminet, the fullback, I didn't realize that he played for Toulouse as well. I must have seen that at some point. I got a feeling like last season he played for someone else, but Toulouse have got Jaminet and Ramos, which just seems ridiculous. Like, someone needs to step in there, because they're both out and out fullbacks. You're not playing one in a different position. But having said that, Toulouse lost to Po. So Po hold on to their top spot in the top 14, beating the champions. So the champions didn't have all of their big players back. Po have made some big signings. I think Sam Whitelock is going there this season.
Yeah, and then they've really struggled in previous seasons, and
they're normally popping up the table.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure in typical French rugby fashion, I believe that all away teams lost. I think all teams who are playing away lost this weekend in the top 14.
That's believable. It's not a high try scoring league. Like so regular listeners will be bored of hearing me saying it. People who think it's like Super Rugby except in French, it's really not. It is the slowest, least attacking league. It's really high quality, and you can tell that all the teams are fabulously well coached. But it is not offloads, line breaks all over the place. It is attritional. Yeah. But Po came out on top of this one. Tell you someone who's not coming out on top at the moment. Old Rogers La Rochelle, currently 4th bottom, I think, in the league. They're not doing well at all. They lost to, checking the notes, newly promoted Oyonnax. So yeah, not going very well at the moment for them. So Po are currently top, but they are actually level on points with Stade Francais and Racing 92, the 2 Paris teams. Toulon brought back all of their big stars. So they had Duncan Payawa, they had Naitha Levu back as well, and they had Dan Bigger back, but they still lost to Perpignan, another lowly team. That was Perpignan's first win of the season. I don't know if you saw, mate, the clip of Dan Bigger's back.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it looked nasty.
Yeah, not good, not good. Anyway, on to the Pro de Deux. Storti and Marquez, the Portuguese lads, scored another couple of tries. Sorry, Storti scored a couple of tries and Marquez were kicking the points. Marquez has looked really good. If you check out Pro de Deux SI de la Week, then Marquez really looks like he's playing some really nice rugby, and he's a bit of an older guy as well, but he really looks like he's tearing it up. Vaughan are still top, pulling clear of Provence. I think they've got a pretty decent gap in the league now, so they'll be favourites for promotion at this stage. What about in England, mate? What's going on over there?
Yeah, in the Prem, Exeter are on top after another win. This time they were playing against Bristol. Despite a hat-trick of Callum Sheedy assists, a timely reminder of his talents as the Welsh fly-off cupboard starts to look bare. Falcons are already bottom with 0 wins. Sarries brought back their England stars to claim a win over Tigers, and they were looking quite poor at the beginning of the season, so that was good to see from a Saracens perspective. In the English Championship, Ealing stay top after a big win against Cambridge, 1 point ahead of Doncaster. In the Scottish Super Series, there was a draw between Heriots and Knights, but Heriots stay top. In the Energia AIL in Ireland, Clontarf are on top in Division 1A with 4 wins from 4 games. Lansdowne are in second. And I just wanted to touch on as well the first weekend. We had the first weekend of the Rugby Europe Super Cup, which we briefly touched on last week. So there were 4 games in total. The Black Lion beat the Iberians. Tel Aviv Heat beat Lusitanos 31-23. The Brussels Devils beat Delta 41-12. And the Romanian Wolves had a massive win over Bohemia 76-7. I think that pretty much wraps up the games.
Just quickly, on the Rugby Super Cup, if you want to follow it and you don't know what team to support, tweet Francisco Isaac, and if you tell him your favorite alcoholic drink and your favorite cheese, he will tell you which Super Rugby Super European Super Cup team is most correct for you. So I told him mine, and he said that I have to be a Black Lion fan, which I kind of rigged my answers to make sure that I was a Black Lion fan. Some people are Wolves fans. Wolves have got a crazy crest. It's got a wolf on it, which I don't think is a surprise, but the wolf is really angry. So just be warned if you want to support them. And obviously Tel Aviv being in it as well might be an eyebrow raiser to some based on what's going on in that part of the world, but it does appear that they are competing as per normal. So yeah,
that pretty much rounds up the results this weekend, folks, from this weekend. And I will publish the TV guide towards the end of the week, and we'll also have our mini breakfast show where I'll talk about some of the big games in that. But one thing I just wanted to briefly touch on before we finish up is the rugby tournament that starts this weekend, Hugh. I don't know. I don't know if it was the first you heard of it when I mentioned it on Twitter. So basically, there is a tournament starting this coming weekend. Now it's only over 2 weekends. Did you get a chance to look into this at all?
Yeah, so I saw a story about it on Rugby America's news, which is a great website. And if you follow America's Ovals on Twitter, that is that guy who does the website. It's a really fantastic website, loads of great news stories on there. And it is so you would say probably the 4 best teams who didn't go to the World Cup. So the next World Cup, obviously, 24 teams. Now, it's unclear whether these 4 teams would be able to get those 4 spots because it involves Canada, USA, and Brazil. And the likelihood is that all 3 of those would be going for the same America's qualification spot. So it's those 3 and Spain. Spain, obviously, we know didn't go to the World Cup because they had yet more eligibility issues. So they were disqualified. But yeah, so there's the 2 games. I can't remember who's playing who. Is Spain playing USA?
Yeah, so basically it's over 2 weekends. So it starts this Saturday. So at 3 p.m. Irish and UK time, USA are taking on Brazil, and then 7 p.m. on Saturday, Spain are taking on Canada. So the name of the tournament is La Villa International Rugby Cup. I've seen very little about this in the media. I've seen very little about it in terms of whether or not it's going to be broadcast, but I happened to check my Rugby Pass TV app, and it seems that both games are being shown. And I cannot find a single article about the broadcast rights online. I don't know if you have. So I'm trying to get people aware of this. So it looks like we'll be able to watch both games. Again, there's nothing official. Like the World Rugby's website, as far as I can see, does not mention the broadcaster, which is their very own Rugby Pass TV. So look, it's a good news story. So yeah, there are 2 additional games on this weekend that probably a lot of people didn't know about.
Yeah.
So if you want to watch USA v Brazil or Spain v Canada or both, check out Rugby Pass TV. It is free to sign up.
Yeah, and it's good to see Brazil be somewhere that watchable because obviously most people don't get a chance to watch Brazil, and there will be all eyes on USA because they're obviously hosting a World Cup in the future, and I think part of the reason that we've gone to a 2014 World Cup is to make sure that USA qualify. So that'll be something to watch. And they did have a decent summer this summer just gone. They played a few games and got some good results. So I'll definitely be tuning into that. There's a little bit of confusion about the Spain team because obviously the Rugby Europe Super Cup is on and this clashes with that. So we're a little bit unsure as to what level of Spain team it's going to be, but we'll find out through watching it. So this is why we play the games, because we don't know what's going to happen.
So I think that pretty much rounds it up for us this week, folks. Thanks a million for tuning in. Hugh, any last words?
Not from me, mate. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to all our new subscribers. And don't forget about the Friday breakfast show.
Thanks, everyone.